Taiwan is expected to top the agenda as Xi Jinping and Joe Biden prepare for their much-anticipated virtual summit. The meeting, set to begin in just over 12 hours, comes as tensions soar between the United States and China. Live to Beijing and Washington in just a moment, but first a look at how the meeting is expected to play out.
Joe Biden and Xi Jinping have met many times before, but this will be their first meeting as presidents of the world's two largest economies. It comes as tensions rise in the U.S.-China relationship. Despite clashing on issues like trade and human rights, both men have said they want to manage competition and find ways to cooperate. Still, expectations of any breakthrough are low. President Xi is expected to warn Mr. Biden to step back on the Taiwan issue and to show restraint. Beijing has repeatedly warned the U.S. against encouraging pro-independence forces on the island.
The Chinese are trying to really figure out what American policy on Taiwan is. I think the U.S. also would like to know, what is China's real red line?
Tensions have risen after China stepped up incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Beijing is also concerned that Mr. Biden has abandoned the One China policy after he said recently that the U.S. would come to Taiwan's defense. The meeting takes place as both presidents face major political tests in the coming year. Mr. Biden and the U.S. Democrats are trying to avoid losing their majorities in the November midterm elections. President Xi is preparing to secure a third term in office next year and will host the Beijing Winter Olympics in February. The Chinese president is widely expected to extend a personal invitation to Mr. Biden to attend the Games.
Olivia Xiong joins us from Beijing. Olivia, China is keen to make Taiwan the priority at these talks.
Not only the priority, but China's foreign ministry has described Taiwan as the most important and sensitive issue when it comes to the Sino-U.S. relationship. And some observers seeing it as the most likely flashpoint that could trigger a confrontation between these two countries. Yet both sides remain far apart, and we are expecting President Xi to not only reiterate Beijing's stance, but also issue a warning to the U.S. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan is a part of its territory, and it has said before that it does not rule out the use of force to bring the self-ruled island under its control if it's necessary. And we have seen comments from Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to his U.S. counterpart Antony Blinken on Saturday, warning the U.S. to not support Taiwan independence, and also expressing opposition for what it says are U.S. wrong actions and words, referring to those warming ties between Taiwan and the U.S., which has angered Beijing. Then we also see China, on its part, increasing its military activity near Taiwan. It says that this has been provoked by pro-independence forces on the Taiwan island and also by U.S. support for these forces.
Olivia, Taiwan isn't the only issue that China and the U.S. are far apart on. What will Beijing see as a successful outcome then?
Well, China's foreign ministry has said that what they are hoping to see is to explore ways of how they can have mutual respect and peaceful coexistence so that the bilateral relationship can return to the right track. And its foreign ministry also said that both sides need to meet each other halfway and be able to find a way to effectively manage their differences. Now, we do know that practically China does want to see a few things happen. When it comes to trade, it wants to see tariffs on Chinese goods being lifted. It also has been bothered by what it sees as the U.S. trying to show up support among its alliances to counter China's rise. And it also wants the U.S. to stop interfering in what it sees as its internal affairs. For example, when it comes to Xinjiang, which the U.S. has accused China of human rights abuses. And so observers, though, however, are saying that in terms of tangible outcomes, that is quite unlikely because both sides continue continue to have these differences, and it doesn't look like a compromise is likely, especially since President Xi Jinping is looking ahead to the next twice-a-decade party conference that is going to happen next year, where he is expected to be given an unprecedented third term in power. And that's just coming off a key Communist Party meeting last week, where his authority was really cemented in the party history, where he was credited for China's growing international influence. So it's very unlikely that we will be seeing President Xi backing down on China's core demands. And so analysts are saying that perhaps the best outcome from this meeting could be both sides agreeing to continue high-level dialogue and to continue these talks going so as to dial down tensions and prevent any sort of geopolitical flare-up.
Many thanks for that. Olivia Song speaking to us from Beijing.
For The View from Washington, D.C., Simon Marks joins us live now. Simon, it's just days ago that Mr. Biden was slamming Mr. Xi for not showing up at COP26.
Yes, and the stage clearly set, Dawn, for what is going to be a very difficult conversation. It may well have been that there were efforts being made here late last week and into the weekend to try and at least defuse the issue of Taiwan. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, tweeted over the weekend that he had spoken with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Friday night. I emphasized U.S. interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and measures to safeguard the global supply chain. But if that was an effort to try and head off the Chinese intention to focus from the get-go on Taiwan, there's no indication that it's worked, with the Global Times describing Taiwan as the ultimate red line for China, and the China Daily saying that President Biden needed to understand that Beijing is resolved to realize national reunification in the foreseeable future, no matter the cost. We did see efforts last week to try and create a more cooperative atmosphere between Washington and Beijing. That announcement at COP26 of the collaboration that the two sides said they're going to engage in on the issue of climate change. But as you note, that came after President Biden had chided the Chinese leader for staying away from the summit in Glasgow. And then, of course, the Chinese were involved in India's move to water down the final agreement that emerged from Glasgow. And that also creates difficulties for the Biden administration, given the enormous focus that the president particularly places on the climate change issue, and the idea that it's one area where the two countries actually can have a productive relationship.
Well, there'll certainly be a focus on potential outcomes from these meetings, Simon, but the US is playing down any expectations of a breakthrough.
Yeah, very much so, and playing down the idea of any specific deliverable outcomes emerging from this conversation, even briefing reporters last week and saying, look, we don't think there's going to be a joint statement issued at the end of this summit. The beginning of it, I see from the White House press schedule, will allow reporters at least to be in the room to film images of President Biden at the beginning of that meeting. A very brief camera spray at the top expected. We don't know how long the conversation is going to last, but we do know that the vast majority of topics are topics of contention, including, of course, President Biden's call on President Xi to do more to identify the origins of COVID-19, America's declaration that China is committing genocide in Xinjiang against the Uyghur Muslims, the issue of democracy and human rights, particularly the rollback of democracy as the United States identifies it in Hong Kong. So all sorts of complexities ahead.
Simon, thank you. Simon Marks in Washington, D.C.